Thank you guys for coming out this morning. I know it might be a rough morning for some people, but we appreciate you guys coming for 10 a.m. For those of you that don't know us, I'm Nuris and this is Graham, and we're with Sport and Social Group, the Crazy Canadians, Crazy Canucks. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, then I'll pass it over to Graham, and then we'll kind of jump into our presentation. So I've been with Sport and Social Group now for 7 years. I started off kind of doing everything you could possibly imagine: customer service, scheduling, being out in the field, tournaments, basically everything. After about a year, I started managing all of our part-time staff, so our referees, coaches, what we used to call our event coordinators, now our league ambassadors out in the field. So was basically managing like hundreds of different people, and through that kind of learned a lot about training field staff and how important that really is. Now I've kind of progressed into a role where I'm the HR manager with Sport and Social Group, so I do a lot of hiring, recruitment, and develop training programs for all of our employees. So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about, so I'm excited to share with you guys today. And then I'll pass it over to Graham.
So I've been with the Sport and Social Group for about 3 years now. Much like Marissa, when I first started, had my hand in a little bit of everything, scheduling, training staff, out on site at the events and leagues. About 6 to 8 months after I had started, I transitioned more into an operational role, and now I manage all the venues that we use. And so the big thing for me whenever we talk about our staff and training them is I always look at it from the perspective of what is it that our venues are looking for, what is it that they're going to need from us, so that we can help them make sure that we follow their rules, we do everything in place, or keep everything in place so that we're doing really well, and they want us to come back afterwards. So one of the things that I've always thought is that training our staff and making sure that they know what we're looking for and they know what the venue itself is looking for, really important to making sure that our members realize that they have a great experience and they don't notice anything going on.
Yeah, so we're gonna kick it off with a question for you guys to make sure you're all awake. Can anyone tell us why is having engaged staff on site important? Does anyone want to take a stab at it? It's not a hard question.
You can get ahead of any risky events or situations that you arrive.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anyone else?
Good customer service.
Yeah, good customer service. Yeah. Engagement with participants. Yep, that's another one.
We always tell our guys, you guys are the face of Zoso. Like, I'm not wearing that. Especially for new people, up until that point, 100% of their interaction with us has happened online. So
Yeah.
when they come to pick up their shirt at their first game, that face is Zoso to them.
Yeah, exactly. Does anyone else have anything else they want to jump in? No. So basically the point we really want to get across is your part-time people that are out in the field, whether they're contractors, league ambassadors, coaches, refs, whatever they may be, they are more important than we are arguably in the room. They're the ones who are interacting with your members on a consistent basis. A lot of us are in the office and in the field every now and again, but they're seeing them every single night. So they are what makes your customer service, your engagement with participants, they're the reason that people are going to come back. So this ties into your member retention. It ties into people's experience. It ties into word of mouth and what they're going to say about your business. So you want to train them almost better than you're training people in your office, so to speak, because they are a huge reflection of the company. They are the most important touch point for members, and they really can be the best part of their day or the best part of their experience, and they're going to be the reason whether your business thrives or your business doesn't do well. So that's kind of the point that we really want to emphasize today.
So then again, just kind of going really quickly with one more question. Anyone want to give us an idea of how much time do you think your full-time staff or you yourselves spend in office dealing with injuries or conflicts that have happened at your games? Like a weekly, yeah.
Like how many hours a week?
How many hours a week do you think you kind of spend on that? 1 or 2. So 20.
20.
Yeah. So
I guess what do you consider a conflict?
well, think about if you have someone who writes into you and you have to deal with them because they have some sort of complaint about their game that happened last night, right?
There you go.
There are a lot of little things that can happen in your games that you end up having to deal with the next day. If you have to deal with that stuff the next day and you weren't able to have your staff deal with it on site, you aren't able to spend your time more effectively helping yourself grow leagues, find new members, go get more teams. That's also why it's so important that your staff are not only engaged, but you set them up for success. because if they can help you deal with that situation on site, you aren't then dealing with it again the next morning. And that's a real easy way for you to empower that part-time staff that you have, who are then able to make your leagues and your events even better.
Next one. All right, so we're just gonna go over the agenda for today. So basically, 3 main things we want to cover are kind of an industry cultural shift towards the importance of part-time staff. A lot of time we all kind of refer to them as part-time staff. Yeah, there's really high turnover. They're just doing it a couple hours a week, but we want to change that. We want to make them the focal point of our industry. They are arguably, as I said before, the most important touch point that players are going to have. So we really need to spend a lot of time investing in training in these staff. The next one is communication and relationship building, whether the relationship building be with players or venues, with people at the head office or whatever it may be. That is a very important pillar as well. And then we're going to cover some protocols and procedures, just some tips and tricks to help your on-site staff really thrive in difficult situations, whether it be a really serious injury or a really serious conflict. Maybe there's like a brawl or a fight or someone breaks their leg and they've never dealt with that before. You equipping your staff with that ahead of time is how they are going to succeed, because it's going to make them more calm in the moment and really make that member experience, even though it's a crappy one, being with an injury or a conflict, that much better.
All right, so really quickly, when I'm talking about conflicts and the things that we're going to go over here, the biggest thing that I can always say, and like I said when I first kind of started out, I'm big on venues, I'm big on those relationships with those venues. And it's not just your relationship that you have with it. You want your members to know that, if there's a caretaker or someone in there, that they can go ask a question, where's the washer? You have set it up so your members can have that type of relationship. And even more importantly is that part-time staff person is able to actually have that relationship too. One of the things that I always tell people when they're starting out, caretaker, the person on site, they're your best friend that night. We have someone on a phone, you can give us a call, we'll help you out as best we can, but that person's actually going to know that venue best. He's going to know where first aid things are. He's going to know what to do in a situation. Maybe they have some rules or some things in place if there's an injury or something. Your staff really need to understand and be able to create those relationships with people. And then, and a part of that there is you have to make sure that your staff know what you need from them. And then you also need to know what you want back from them. So that kind of two-way piece of communication is really key. You can send them something every week. You can tell them what they're supposed to do when they're out on the field. But you need to make sure you're getting information back from them as well, too. For us, what we do is we have what we call a shift report. They have to submit a shift report after every single one of the shifts that they work for us. And what that allows us to do is it makes it so much easier for us to be able to follow up on anything that happens that night. It's something that takes a little bit of time for them to go in and do, but it really isn't that big of an ask for them to go and do that, because at the end of the day, we really need that information coming back in from them. And then the last thing that we're going to do is in terms of some of those tips and tricks, as you can see here, what we call it is the incident-o-meter, and we'll kind of run all the way through that with you really quickly. And it's a great way to help train your staff to de-escalate situations so that it doesn't get to that fight or that brawl or anything else that's happening, and then that can create an even better experience for your members.
Great. And just a quick overview of what we're going to cover in injuries. So what expectations do you have for your staff on site? You want to equip them with the proper tools up front. Basically, knowledge is power. I know you guys have heard that a bunch of times, but as much information as they can have ahead of time is key. What we do with our staff is we actually have an onboarding document that we give to them that has all our protocols for injuries, incidents, conflict management, because in the heat of the moment, they may need to pull out their phone and kind of go through those steps, because it is scary for a lot of people, especially if it's students, whether they be in high school or college, maybe it's their first part-time job. They're not used to dealing with that level of conflict or serious injury. So we want to give them the tools ahead of time and make them accessible so that they can just pull it up on their phone. So in the moment, they know what questions to ask, what information they need to get, so that they can get it back to you guys at the office so that you have everything you need to follow up if there is a serious injury or incident. Ensuring that they collect the right information as well. Documentation is really, really important. We work in an industry where there are tons of injuries all the time. There's also a huge liability that is connected with that too, because someone could sue you if they blow out their knee. So ensuring that they collect all the proper information, like first name, last name, we'll go over it in more detail. what time the injury happened, how it happened is really, really important. So teaching your staff to properly document is extremely important, and you guys will be really, really thankful if they're able to get that information ahead of time instead of you having to follow up retroactively. And then protocols. So we're going to go over some protocols and emergency game plans and share you guys some that we give to our staff ourselves so that you can kind of share that information with them in an electronic form to collect all the info they need.
All right, so building that relationship with the venues, kind of like I said, right? It's that person who's there on site at night. You might not actually have easy access to be able to talk to that person, but he might be the most important person who works at that venue. And that is one of those reasons why I say it is so important that your staff create those relationships. Because if he's the person that's on site that night and you can't actually easily call them during the day because they're working a night shift, that means that you don't actually have access to talk to the person who's going to be managing the venue that day. As your clubs always continue to grow, it becomes so much more important that your staff really understand that they need to help you and that creating that relationship is actually going to be a really important piece for them because they are going to need that help. They are going to need the person from that venue to be able to direct them if something does happen. And you just want to make sure that they understand how important that relationship and how important building relationships in general is. The other thing too there is about also empowering your staff, right? If you don't want your part-time staff answering any questions, if you don't want them, really giving away any information to your members or to the venue itself, all you're doing is creating more work for yourself. All you're doing is taking that time that you could have used the next day to try and grow your leagues, start something new. Now you're just dealing with the issues from last night, right? You want to be really, really smart about what type of information you're asking them to share with members and venue staff. But at the end of the day, the more you empower these people to be able to help you on site during those games, the better off you're going to be in the long run as a result. I know this is kind of something that really hits home for me. This idea of meeting people in person. I'm terrible with names. I'll be the first one to admit it. But if I can put a face to a name, I can remember you pretty easily, right? And so even if you don't have contact with the person who might be on site that night, go meet the person who you actually are in contact with, right? Creating that relationship, not only is it important for your part-time staff, but it's important for you to do as well. For us, I have a hard time doing it. There's lots of venues that I'm managing, but I make a point of trying to get out and see a couple of different ones, every season that we can. And the most important thing for me when I'm doing that is just making sure that they know that if they have any issues, if anything is coming up and they're running into problems with us, let me know. I want to work with you so that I can come back and I'm their best tenant. They don't want anybody else coming in because they just want me renting all of their time and using their space. And then the one other thing that I always like to say, and I know it seems a little strange, especially when you have a problem venue, but always remember that these places don't want to be sitting empty. They want people in there, they want people playing, they want people using the space, but they have their own rules and regulations they have to follow. They have their own guidelines that they need to do. There are things that they have to get done that our staff or our members don't think about. So don't think that if a venue is coming to you and saying, oh, you guys need to be out 15 minutes earlier, or oh, you guys are leaving a big mess behind. That's not them coming to you and trying to say, you're a bad tenant, we don't want you here anymore. But what we want to remember at the same time is that it's really important that we work with them so that they know that when you hear that, you can take that feedback and go, thank you. Now that I know that this is a problem for us, or that this is an issue that you're facing when we're in there, we can talk to our staff. That's one of those ways you can empower those people to be able to make sure that they're making the experience for your members better. And then at the end of the day, you have an easy space that you're able to go back to season over season, year over year. They're asking you to come back. They want you coming back to be the people that are filling their space, and then they have an easy tenant to be able to deal with the whole time.
So next question. What is your definition of a rockstar ambassador for your business? I'll preface this by saying that recently we actually changed the job title of our part-time staff from event coordinator, which it was for probably 24 plus years, to league ambassador. this is something I personally thought was like extremely important because we really wanted to put it out there and attract people that wanted to be raving fans and ambassadors for Sport and Social Group. We had a bunch of people that would apply that were like, oh, I want to do wedding planning and events and all this stuff. So we felt like changing that name, I know many of you probably call them league ambassadors and other things in this room as well, was a really important thing for us, which then made us start thinking, what is a Sport and Social Club ambassador? What does that mean to us? And we kind of sat down and defined that. So basically the idea is it's kind of a mindset shift. So we wanted to kind of really put it out there that it's a cultural shift in the industry. We want our staff that are on site to be raving fans of the brand. We don't want them to come out and just be picking up a paycheck for extra beer money or for their tuition or whatever it may be. We want them to be going out, recruiting players on our behalf, talking about how Sport and Social Club is so awesome, the best thing ever. Social sports is like made their life. We want them to be, that's what we want them to emit and put out there. It's a huge cultural shift because oftentimes I even find at our office, I catch people talking negatively about the part-time staff, like, oh, they were just on their phone, they weren't really engaging with members. So we all kind of sat down and had this big conversation about that's not acceptable anymore. These guys are the most important people on site. It needs to be kind of a whole industry-wide mindset, in my opinion, in order to make everyone an ambassador, in order for everyone to succeed. Because what Graham was talking about earlier, that will allow you guys free time to go look for more venues, maybe build a venue if you're looking to do that, free up time to grow your business and spend time on the things that matter instead of dealing with the day-to-day incidents and injuries, because a lot of the part-time staff that you hire are fully capable of doing that. You just need to empower them to do so. So the next thing we're going to talk about is communication and training. You guys need to expect your staff to perform based on the tools that you provide them. So if you just hire someone, maybe you only get like 5 applications for a job. We get it, that happens. Some people aren't getting like 250 applications for a particular position. And so you're just basically putting bodies out on the field. We've all been there. I'm sure some people are still in that spot right now. You want to give tools though to those 5 people, what they can to succeed. So basically, by giving them proper training. So we do an annual training session where we invite all of our staff in. They get to hang out with head office staff. They get to meet each other. We go over conflict protocol, injury protocol. You guys can see some of the photos down here. We actually get them to role play. So they're the injured player and then someone is the staff, and they have to interact on site as if they're dealing with a real injury. And we're pretty hard on them too. Like they can't, some of them try and laugh it off, and we actually want them to be serious and treat it like a serious injury as if it's happening in real time. So having those real role play scenarios is really important. Frequent, clear, and concise and consistent communication is key. So what Graham was saying earlier as well, you guys want to constantly be talking to your staff. You want to drop in on them at leagues. You want to give them a phone call. You want to invite them to meet the head office staff. You want to invite them to socials, to meet captains, to meet other people as well. So having that open line of communication and not just expecting them to show up on site at their shifts, clock, punch in, punch out, and leave, that is not the mentality we want. We really want these staff to be fully engaged, and you guys are a huge part in making that happen. By you reaching out and kind of giving them that opportunity to meet captains, meet your office staff, will go a really long way. And then the annual training day as well. This is something that I know a lot of clubs have different ways to do training. We do annual training, quarterly training, group interview training, on-site training. So I know it sounds like a lot of training, but the more consistent and frequent that you guys are training your staff and giving them refresher courses and things like that, that will equip them with the tools they need to be successful. We have some staff, I'm sure many of you guys do as well, that have worked with us for like 10 years, and they even need to be retrained. They're not necessarily the best of the best, because sometimes they fall into bad habits, and you guys need to get them out of those habits. So by having this consistent training is extremely important. Consistency is key. I always like to say that at our office as well. Having everyone trained the same way is going to go a really long way in the member experience, because it'll make a member's experience at one venue the same as if they're playing a sport on a different night at another venue. Cool? Yeah.
What's, either you or any in the room, what's the you say, frequent, clear, concise, consistent communication. What's the best way to communicate with part-time staff? Email's dying, text is easy, but you can't information? You put them in, Facebook groups, Slack groups. How do you guys communicate that?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of different channels that we've kind of identified recently as been too many. I personally think Slack is probably going to become the best way. Instant messaging is the best way to reach staff, especially people who are coming up from high school and college right now. They don't read emails, so we've noticed that our email communication has actually gone down. I'm sure many of you guys have noticed that as well, but the response time with emails is very, very low. So we've had to find other ways to reach out to them. Text messaging is also big. We often text our staff. We do have office phones that we use to do that, so that's something that I would definitely suggest to reach out to them kind of instantly. Slack is a big one. Social media is even a big one. Email, unfortunately, it's a great way to get a lot of information out to staff, but you're probably not going to get a response very quick. Does anyone else use any? That's a good question.
Use
Yeah.
Slack for-
You guys use Slack? Yeah.
And we train some of our more advanced staff to be able to answer questions in the Slack channel, so it's not always me that's doing it.
Right. Cool. Anyone else?
We use,
Yeah.
when I work, and it's like our schedule
Oh, cool.
thing, and we just put it, we have a work chat, that's the best way that I can reach out to my staff.
Yeah, for sure. So any way that they can kind of communicate with other staff and also communicate with your office in an instant way, I would say is probably the best way. And then the last thing I'll say is we are really lucky that we work in a fun and social industry. We have some of the best jobs in the world, I personally think. I think many of you guys would agree. But because of that, we may be attracting some people that are coming in for the wrong reasons. So that's why you guys want to really ensure that your interview process, your training process is really consistent and really professional, and not just throwing someone on a field and saying, hey, can you go ref this football game? I know you refed one game in high school. You can go figure it out kind of thing. So as much training as you can do ahead of time will really, really save you guys a lot of admin time in the office to focus on those bigger things, as we've said many times.
All right, so this is what we call the incident-o-meter. It's just a fun and easy way for us to show our staff some simple steps that they can go through to help de-escalate situations. I'll be honest, I think we just ripped this. You can Google this and you can find this pretty easily too for yourselves, which is really helpful, right? And I mean, like, you start at the bottom, right? The biggest thing there, being preemptive. I'm sure some people, you've always heard the saying, the best offense is a good defense, right? Your captain's meetings. When your staff are bringing people on site, and they're coming and they're bringing everybody together, make sure they ask for the captain's names, right? Have them introduce themselves, right? Create that type of personal connection with them, and then that way, it's not like they're just sitting there going like, oh, that's just the guy who's sitting there, right? Like, they actually know who that person is. They aren't just going to start screaming and yelling at them because they respect them a little more, right? Something as small as a name, you don't think about it that much, but it makes such a big difference when you're out on site and doing things like this. We tell our staff all the time, we've got your back. So while step 1 is being preemptive, steps 2 through 4, those are really about during the game, what is going on. Those are a couple of different things that you can do to try and make sure that there are no major issues as the game continues to get played. Again, we're running sports leagues. We know people are going to be coming out. We know they're going to be competitive. I know nobody here likes to lose. I'm sure no one who plays with us likes to lose either, right? So we have to remember that in the moment, when people are being competitive, they aren't going to be thinking straight. So have staff do things like calling a timeout, making sure that maybe teams just go take a break. Maybe it's 5 minutes before halftime normally happens, but you know what? That's fine. Have halftime early. Give everyone a chance to calm down, go back out, finish the game. If you are running, for example, when we run leagues where we've got a turf field, we'll run multiple games. If there's a big issue on one particular field, we'll tell our staff, focus on that game. Don't ignore everybody else, but actually stand there, watch it, be present, make your members realize that you are watching, you're paying attention, you know what's actually going on when something like that is happening. I'm always a big proponent of not picking on, but like pointing out the people who are actually causing the issue, right? Because again, there could be one person on one team that is causing the problem, and they're ruining the experience for everybody else that is there. There was one time I was actually out, I was doing one of the shifts that we would have, doing a floor hockey game. a very innocent play where a ball goes towards the wall and someone shoved somebody from behind into the wall. Now, luckily, the person who got pushed didn't get hurt, but he bounced right up like there was about to be a fight. All I did was I just took the guy who pushed him, I kicked him out. I just said, you need to leave, you can't play anymore tonight. I had both teams come back up to me afterwards and say, thank you. Even the team who was their teammates, their captain came to me afterwards, he said, that's not how he normally is, but we really appreciate that you just jumped in right away, told this person that he couldn't play anymore, and it was just for that one game, right? But that's something really small that I was able to do on site. We didn't have to deal with it the next day. We got an email the next day from both teams saying, hey, this guy did a really good job. We really appreciated that he was able to act so quickly, but we didn't have any big follow-up that was going on with it, right? So that's another thing that you can do. But you have to tell your staff in those types of situations, you've got their back. Whatever they decide to do on site, you have to back them up afterwards. Because if you don't, they're not going to want to do that anymore, and then they're not going to be engaged with your members, and then they're going to turn into bad staff. And then finally, you can always call the games early. If a fight breaks out, if something starts to happen where both teams are just jawing at each other and it's just going on too much, just tell them to stop playing. At the end of the day, the most important thing in my mind when people are coming to play with us is that they're in a fun, safe environment and that they're just being active. They're getting to be around, they get to play sports, be social. But if it's not a safe environment for them to be playing in, if they lose the last 5 minutes of their game, then so be it. The way that I always kind of think of it is, unfortunately sometimes you don't think you have to tell adults how to act and behave, but again, in the heat of the moment, people aren't thinking rationally. They're not actually going through and thinking properly about what they're doing and what their actions look like to other people. So being sure that your staff understand that if they call the game early and you're going to have their back, another really powerful way to be able to try and help make your members have a better experience. But obviously it's only your last resort, and you really don't want to have to do that because then you are going to have to deal with that later on afterwards as well.
I have a question.
Yep.
Knowing how you guys operate, and I just have a question. So I like these steps. Is this assuming it is a self-ref game?
Yeah, so
Yes.
we should have prefaced that at the beginning by
That's
saying,
because
yeah,
you're talking about league ambassadors, our league coordinators,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them. We run into sticky situations that we have referees who are supposed to control the game,
Mm-hmm.
and I want our ambassadors to do some of those things. But if they step in and call a 2-minute timeout, the official probably going to have an issue with that, thinking that they have control.
for sure, yeah.
I think there's a couple more steps if you have officials on, pulling the official aside.
Yeah, and it's a good
them
question.
Control the
Yeah.
game, but you're there to
Yeah.
keep a second set of eyes.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, in Canada we do have mostly self-officiated leagues. We have officiated leagues as well where we have refs, like Chris was saying, and league ambassadors on site, so we kind of have both. But the majority of our leagues right now are self-officiated, so it is very, very different. So just kind of keep that in mind throughout the presentation. Sorry, you want to jump in and say something?
Yeah, well, and the only other thing that I was going to say, right, is that whole idea of creating those relationships. That's that point in time where your league ambassadors or your league coordinators, whatever you call them, you have them speak with the officials before those games start. I know, for example, with us, basketball is really tough because we have different officials every week for all of our officiated basketball leagues that we run. So we tell our staff, go introduce yourself. Go say, hey, I'm the, they might be keeping score. They're on site. They're representing Sport and Social Group, but we want them to also know that they need to work with those officials as well. But that's a great point. About the idea of when it is an officiated game, you do have those couple extra steps because you have someone there that's actually supposed to be controlling the game as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, during our interview process, we do ask our staff about relationship building. If you ask that question in an interview and you have people that think that is not important, they should not work for you guys. They do not understand what our leagues are about. They're all about building community and relationships. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but if people don't understand the importance of relationship building with officials, with venues, with each other, with office staff, with players, they're probably not the right fit for your culture or your leagues, because that is probably the number one most important thing when you're looking to hire a staff on site. So we're going to talk a little bit about emergency preparedness. So again, we're going to sound like broken records, but being really proactive is really important in situations like this. Unfortunately, there are things that do come up. An emergency could be anything from like a fire at a venue. I'll give a real life example that we actually did have a dome collapse at a university. Luckily, it was overnight. There was no one in the venue, but there very well could have been games going on when that happened. So you need to ensure that you equip your staff on site for those emergencies that could happen, because they could happen at any moment. That's why they're called emergencies. Nobody knows when it's going to come up, so giving them these tools ahead of time is really, really important. So doing your research. It's really important that you guys understand it's your responsibility to find out this information ahead of time and put it in the hands of your staff. Educating them is something that is extremely important, and same with them. So if they hear of something on site at a venue, like say an entrance has changed, or they're doing construction and there's scaffolding that's in the corner of a dome or a gym, they need to relay that back to you, as Graham was saying earlier. First aid. So we give all of our staff a first aid kit. All of our league ambassadors on site have one on hand, because not all of our venues allow us to store this on site. They're not required to be first aid trained. I don't know if many of you guys, does anyone have that it's mandatory that they have to have first aid? No one does. Okay. So we have the same thing where they don't need to have mandatory first aid and CPR training, but we do run through an injury workshop with them before they're hired and at our annual training day session that we host as well. And again, that's just giving them, yeah.
Could you elaborate on what the training is for first aid? Because I mean, we have injuries. I just don't know how far we're supposed to help. I mean, we obviously can't put a shoulder back in place, but we can get Band-Aids.
Yeah, exactly. So we actually have on the next slide, we have kind of a step-by-step thing of injuries that we'll get to as well. But we just basically give them the first aid kit. We actually have had someone previously come into our annual training day sessions to do not an official first aid training, but it's someone who's certified, and they kind of go over the basics of what should happen in severe injuries. So one thing that we like to focus on is head injuries. So they sometimes spend like 15 minutes talking just about head injuries, because that's something that we all know is like very prominent and extremely serious. So the questions to ask, like asking for their name and all that. So we'll go through that on the next slide. I don't want to jump ahead too much. But yeah, it is hard. It's like it's a difficult balance, because if you're not requiring for them to be first aid certified, a lot of the players on site assume that they are, and they're going to expect them to know how to fix a broken leg if like a bone is piercing out of their skin, whereas most staff don't. So basically what you guys want to train your staff to do is to remain calm on site and ensure that you collect all the appropriate information and document it so that you guys have that in the event of worst case scenario, like there's a major liability issue that comes up.
Good. I have a.
Yep.
Is anyone here on, I'm assuming some people are on Bell Anderson, Philadelphia. They're starting to make, I don't know if it's already set in place, but Jason said within the next year, mandatory that all your field staff has to have concussion training.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
that.
Okay, yeah, we went through, all that. It's about a 2-hour or an hour online program.
Yeah, Jason, he was actually supposed to be here at the end of our presentation today too to help answer the liability stuff. So I would say if you guys have questions about that, you can just email him as well, because he's definitely an expert kind of in that side of things. And then understanding emergency and injury procedures. So ensuring your staff are familiar with those procedures that we'll show you in a little bit. Encouraging your staff to ask questions. An open line of communication is extremely important. When someone gets injured on site, they should not just go say, hey, are you okay? And not talk to them for the rest of the game. Sometimes injuries happen at the beginning of the game, and that player is going to sit on the sideline and just watch their team for the rest of the game. They need to constantly be going back a couple times throughout the game to make sure that person is still okay, because things can get worse and progress. So you guys need to have that information in hand. Being attentive, ensuring that your staff know to always pay attention. Keep an eye out for hazards, and make sure that they kind of are always staying alert and are aware of things on site. So what I mean by this is when they get to the venue, are they walking around looking to see if there's potholes, if there's rocks, if there's anything that anyone could kind of step on, like a piece of glass, clearing the playing area of any of that stuff, just to make sure that it's the safest place possible for players to play their game. Oftentimes, we found like a couple years ago, our staff were just showing up on site and not doing that sweep. And we were getting silly little injuries, like people stepping on glass or tripping over tile in the gym that came loose, when that could have easily been avoided if they just would have done the walkthrough ahead of time. So this is why we really want to emphasize being proactive and doing those site checks and things like that, and letting your staff know that it is their job to do that, empowering them to kind of own their league and let them know it's their responsibility to do this stuff is extremely important.
Yeah, Yeah, so like Nuris said, we have a pretty robust protocol that we want all of our staff to go through whenever there's an injury or something like that takes place. Obviously, the most important thing is responding as soon as that injury happens. The only way they can do that is if they're being attentive, right? So that's why it is so important that your staff are not reading a book or playing on their phone or anything. You really want them to understand that you want them watching and paying attention to everything that's going on, because as soon as something happens, you want them to be able to react as quickly as possible. The next thing there, so as you can see, these are the basic questions that we always want these people to ask, right? We always want to know name, what the injury is, what happened, was it a head injury, is there anything that we can do with first aid, and then if we need to call an ambulance or not. Kind of like Chris was saying there a little earlier, or sorry, it wasn't Chris, sorry, I forget your name. Brian was saying a little earlier, what's the threshold? It really depends on what the injury is. And the way that I always thought, I explained it to staff when I was training them was, think about what's in your first aid kit. Don't go beyond what we're giving you. And if it's something that is more serious, get a professional to come and help. Because it is way better that you let someone who knows what they're doing step in that situation, and we just make sure that that member is comfortable and there's going to be okay, and we can rely on other people to be able to do or handle those more serious injuries, and we are there to support them throughout that entire period of time. Again, right, like I know it says there like step 4, it seems kind of strange, right? Like we ask all those questions and it's like gather as much information as possible. How did it happen, right? Like if they say, oh, I tripped and fell and I twisted my ankle. Well, it's like, okay, like ask them to dig a little deeper than that, right? Like, did you trip and fall because you tripped over someone's foot? Did you step on your own shoelaces, right? Like the more information that you collect, the more detailed your information is, the better off you're going to be to deal with the repercussions of that injury, right? Yeah.
You mentioned get someone who knows what they're doing.
Yes.
Where do you stand on a situation where someone who's there playing, I'm a nurse, I'm a PA, I'm a doctor, let me take a look. Where do you stand on that situation?
We have that happen actually quite frequently, almost all the time. A lot of players in our leagues just happen to be nurses or doctors or have some kind of training, which is great because there's always someone at the venue who, not always, but almost always, and I would say that's 100% okay to allow them to look at that because they're certified, they're trained, they're going to know more than our staff on site if they don't have that certification. So trust the professional and make sure that you let your staff know that that's okay. It's not their responsibility to fix an injury that they've never seen before or dealt with. So they're much more comfortable knowing that. We actually tell them in our training that there are quite a few people that play in our leagues who are nurses, doctors, coaches, have first aid training. So to reach out to people at the venue, to reach out to teams that are playing at the venue ahead of time and developing those relationships, they'll get to know that too. So they'll say like, I don't know, Bob on, the Green Monster team is a doctor because they've talked to them for the last month and developed that player relationship with them and they know what they do for a living. So then if someone has a broken leg, they know that he's playing over here on field 2 and he can run over and get him. If that makes sense.
At the end of the day, it's about like consent, right? Like the injured player, if they say, it's cool if you treat me.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. As long as they have consent, it's totally fine.
And I think in our experience, especially doctors' experience, they have an ethical obligation to provide this care.
Yes.
Exactly.
They of us
Exactly,
that are
yeah.
supposed to do that.
Yeah,
Literally.
exactly.
And here's the, they have better training than all of us, any of our staff. They know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
Hey, can I take a look? They immediately work that consent into their addressing it. At least in my experience.
100%, yeah. I would say that in that situation where there is like a doctor on site, your guys' staff's role would just be to collect all the information, like Graham was saying.
Yeah.
They just need to make sure they document that, including the name of the person that helped treat that player. So the name of the doctor or nurse is also important, just as much information as you can get.
Yeah. And then the last thing that we always say that I think might be the most important thing after they've dealt with the injury themselves is getting you that information. So we had mentioned a little earlier, we have our staff, they have to fill out a shift report at the end of every one of their shifts. Some of our staff, they don't get home until 1 o'clock in the morning. We ask them to submit it the night that they get home. We know that sometimes that's not realistic, but we tell them if there's an injury, especially a serious injury, you have to submit the report that night because we want to know what happened when we come into the office the next morning. We don't want to wake up, come in, have someone emailing in, calling, someone broke their leg last night, this was crazy, we can't believe what happened, and we have no information from our staff. We need to know that information right away. We really stress to them how important it is that they tell us that as quickly as possible.
And then this emergency game plan, so this is specifically just some high level things we wanted to share with you guys about the event in the event of a catastrophic injury. I believe last year there was a seminar about catastrophic injuries. I don't know if anyone in this room was in there. Yeah, Chris was in there. A couple of you guys were in there. So this is more just about some kind of important things that you guys can do to equip your staff. To ensure that in the event of a catastrophic injury, like this is things we're talking about are like death of a player due to an injury on the field, that they're prepared so that they can remain calm to deal with that situation as best they can. So ensuring that they follow the proper procedures that you guys have in place, designating someone from your office who can act as a risk manager, who's a contact to deal with those situations after the fact. So the way that it works at our office is we have, in the event that there is a catastrophic event, we have someone designated that those staff can call, and they're trained in dealing with very kind of serious catastrophic situations, emergencies, and injuries. Planning to coordinate with the staff and first responders as well. Investigating the scene and gathering as much information as possible. I know we've said that a million times, but that is really, really important. We really want to drill that point home today. And then the most important thing, I think, is relieving the staff member on site. In the event that something like this ever happens, hopefully none of us ever have to deal with this type of situation, because it is obviously a very, very serious thing. It can have a huge impact on your staff. So you guys recognizing that is extremely important. They're not going to be okay to go work their shift the next night or probably for the next couple weeks if they've witnessed something that serious. It doesn't even have to be a catastrophic thing as serious as like a death during a game. It could be something just like a broken leg and the bone pierces the skin. Maybe they've never seen anything that gruesome before, and it kind of sticks with them. So it's important that you guys recognize that and allow them time off. If we've ever had situations like that, we've given them paid time off and just said, don't worry about your shifts, we get it. Like it was a really serious thing that you had to witness. So that shows them that you care as well. So they feel more comfortable knowing that you guys kind of have their back, which is what Graham was mentioning before as well.
All right, so again, we just want to really quickly go through some of the key takeaways that, we think are the most important when it comes to dealing with your staff and having them on site. Again, that relationship building is key, and even more important than that is having the communication as you're building those relationships. This isn't about, just your relationship with your staff. It's your staff's relationship with the members. It's the staff's relationship with the venues themselves. If there's officials involved, what your staff person is doing there on site, they're your point person, right? They're the one who are kind of representing your organization as games are getting played. So they have to have those touch points with everybody, and you have to make sure that you have a good two-way communication with that person. They can give you feedback. They can tell you things that they're seeing that aren't working. They can tell you about major issues that are coming up. Just like you're going to go to them and tell them, oh, this team, there's a player who's been suspended. They can't have this person on the field for the night, right? You want to make sure they are comfortable coming back and telling you those things, because that's the only way you're really going to be able to improve all of your leagues or events. And then your staff are going to be empowered to help you make them even better. Empowering your staff and what you want them to do on site is something that I know I still struggle with all the time too. But finding the ways that's going to work best for you to be able to have your staff people really help deal with these situations when they happen is going to be key to making sure that if someone gets injured, maybe they're still going to want to come back and play. You're not going to have to deal with 2, 3, 10 hours of additional work that comes from some sort of injury or something that happens. You really want to have your staff understand that because they're the face, they're the person that's there on site, they are so important, and empowering them to have some decision-making ability to be able to give information or be able to deal with these situations is going to make your lives and our lives a whole lot easier. And then the last thing, and something that Nuris pointed to, is that there's always something new to learn and retraining your staff, even your best staff, is a great practice to get into, and a great practice to get into with them early on. We have some staff that have been with us 10 plus years. They're a little stubborn. They do things their own way, and we still go back and check in on them. We still go tell them, hey, what's going on here? Or, we need you to just stop being on your phone so much. Or, we heard we had this issue come up from a couple of weeks ago. Just want you to be aware. We aren't going to them and saying, you need to be better, you're doing a bad job. But what we want to do is we want to frame it in a way that they're going to say, I can be better, and as a result of me being better here, the leagues are better, I'm a better person as a result of it, I'm a better league ambassador as a result of it, and then the members and the experience that we're actually creating is going to be better for everybody involved.
Yeah, kind of the last thing we just really wanted to stress, Cam kind of said this on his first day in his presentation as well, but having well-trained staff or happy staff that feel comfortable and like they own their leagues and are those raving fans will make happy members. It's all related. We all know this, like everyone's had experience with really good staff and really bad staff. So ensuring that you guys are giving them the tools and empowering them will just translate into the experience that your members have on site. So that's kind of like a really big takeaway that we want you guys to take with you today. And just really, really stress that your staff want ownership of their leagues. They want to be the people that are out there having those conversations with members. They want to be empowered. They want to own the volleyball league on Tuesday night. They want to be that face. I think many of us often think that they just want to do this for the beer money I was saying earlier, for extra cash on the side. Maybe a lot of them are working 5 or 6 shifts a week. But by giving them the power and those tools ahead of time, it'll make for a better member experience overall that'll make everyone's business better in the end. So we're done, but we just had this question. I don't know if anyone wants to share any kind of crazy situations they've had to deal with where they wish maybe their staff would have been better trained on site or better equipped to handle a situation. Yeah.
There was one that I'll only bring it up because we ended up talking with Jason Webb about it after the fact, but it was fairly simple. A guy dislocated his knee and his leg went out like the wrong direction.
Right.
Gross. But my staff went up and talked to him, and one of the first things he said to the staff was, "Oh no, this is like the 3rd time it's happened." So, and my staff put that in their recap at the end of the night. Like they email us their hours of the shift and a recap of what happened and everything. So I had that in an email, his entire documentation of the conversation he had with that person. And when we talked to Jason Webb about it later, he's like, that's actually a really key fact that now he can't come back later and say, your league injured me, now I need medical bills, blah, 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 because he's admitted right up front that he has a pre-existing condition. He signed our waiver and he still chose to play.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a really good example of like documenting all the information on site and how that's really important. Anything that a player says to your staff on site is really important to get in writing.
Yeah, and my staff didn't even necessarily make that whole connection
right
through, but the fact that he put it in his recap helped us out.
For sure, yeah, that's really important. Writing, everything getting documented. I know it's like a huge pain in the ass for everyone to make sure everything is like jotted down, but it will really help you guys because you never know when someone's going to come after you with that type of lawsuit. So it's just really important to make sure that you guys have your timelines right and that everything's documented as well. So by implementing things like shift reports or having to email in after the fact is a really great way to do that as well. Yeah.
Well, I kind of have a question also based off an incident. So I love the idea of the incident-o-meter and having something in writing. Do you all share that in some way with the players or like a code of conduct or something of like, hey, this is our process for dealing with conflict so that they already know?
So we don't share the incident-o-meter directly with our players. We do share it in our kind of onboarding manual that we give to all our staff that they can pull up and access electronically on their phone anytime they're at their shifts. But we do have those procedures kind of outlined almost in a similar way on our website. It's not the incident-o-meter, but it's more of like our company kind of policies and code of conduct for players, if that makes sense. So it's not in the visual way, the step-by-step, like nice way this will happen to you. But that is outlined, but it is kind of a bit buried in the website, if that makes sense.
In professional sports, like there are, very strict guidelines on like basketball, you get this number of fouls and you're out. Soccer, you get a yellow card, you get a second yellow card, you're out.
Yeah.
Then in our like social sports industry, sometimes it's a little more like wishy-washy and like incidents are different. And I think it's just, hard to communicate, like we should all be communicating more clearly, like to the players' expectations.
For sure, yeah. We have like our policies, like which is basically within the code of conduct, but also for specific sports in our rules, we have specific rules that will say like when our players will be ejected when X happens or whatever. And most of the players know that, so that's again a perfect example of if it's out there and they have access to it, it's easy for your staff on site to go up and say, hey, it's in the rules. So I would say the rules is probably the easiest place to put that type of information, which I'm sure many of you guys have, because players are going to argue if it's not in the rules, they're allowed to do it. They're allowed to slide tackle if it's not blatantly written in the rules.
So do you have consequences written into your rules?
We don't have consequences. We actually have a discipline team that kind of deals with any incidents or incidents that come in or any conflict. And it's kind of a case-by-case basis, but they have their own process of how they would discipline someone. For example, if someone just goes up, blatantly walks up and sucker punches someone for no reason, they're probably going to be ejected from the league or at least banned for like a year, probably for life, because that's not okay. If there's something where there's a bit of a gray area, they might give them a warning, and then the next time they do something, they might be ejected or suspended from the league. So it's very case-by-case basis. It's less of like a structure. It's a bit hard because every situation is really different. And again, I keep going back to the staff, but that's why having them as kind of the unbiased person on site to tell both sides of the story and document that is really, really important.
The other thing here to keep in mind as well, something that works in our system that's very helpful, is we can make notes and tag incidents directly to a person's profile. And that's really important too, right? Because we want to look at everything on a case-by-case basis, but you also want to know that history as well too, because that's going to help you make your decision. If it was a random one-time thing, something happened, you're probably going to give them a warning and let them come back and keep playing, because again, at the end of the day, the whole idea of social sports, we want people out active and playing. But if you've been suspended 3 or 4 times, or there have been a number of issues that have come up over the years that you've been playing, we're going to factor that into our decision. Just like you would see, in professional sports, it's important that we monitor that as well for our members, because that's going to be really important in ensuring that we are giving out the right type of punishment for the person and whatever actually happened in that moment.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to fire your players. Like sometimes you just have to let them go because it's for the overall kind of greater good of the league. Yeah. Any other questions? You guys are good? Yeah. Great, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, guys.